board meeting of the select board and the finance committee. As you know, we're here to discuss the proposed override. Introduce, open the select board side of the meeting, and then the finance committee will open their side. On this side of the room, we have Jennifer Sanders Jane, Laura Wilcox, HR director, Evan Smith, Holly Keegan, myself, Randy Eisner on the select board, and on Zoom we have Amy Parsons for the select board, and we have Mike Mason, the acting town administrator.
Okay, so I'll call the finance committee meeting order, and here tonight we have Peter Machusko, Paul Benjamin, Charles Farmer, myself, Amy Fiden, and coming in shortly will be Andy Kopecki. And finance director at the end is Linda Sanderson.
Okay, with that, Mr. Mason is going to lead the presentation for us.
Thank you, Randy. Welcome, everyone. This will be the third public hearing that we've done for this potential override, and we do have probably the dates of the last public forum as well as the town meeting and the special election that will be coming up. I'm gonna shepherd you through this process. I'm not sure if I feel better or worse every time we do one of these. We are recording all of them. They are all on Hadley Media, so there's 2 other ones. We've changed the slideshow very slightly each time we've done one based upon some really good questions and comments from the public, as well as the 1-page document that you have in front of you. We've changed that a couple of times as well to add some information that some folks suggested that we thought was pretty valuable for everybody to know. So we'll start with what is a Prop 2.5 override, the difference between the Prop 2.5 part and the override, and how does the real estate tax rate work? So several years ago, the town of Hadley adopted what's called a Prop 2.5. Essentially, what that means is that annually, 2.5% is added to your tax base, as added to your budget each year, so that the idea being that as inflation happens and as things become more expensive, the taxes that the town brings in can keep up with that, and we can continue to afford what we're using your money for. The override part of that is what we're here to discuss tonight. What has been happening in Hadley over the last many years is that as inflation has occurred, it has gradually grown away from that 2.5 that we are bringing in. And year after year, Linda, who's been in charge of writing budgets for the town for the last decade or so, has been in charge of essentially closing that gap any way that she can. We can't bring in more money without additional real estate taxes. Essentially, the way that it works is we run folks through a budget process. We reduce their budget as best we can. People will come in and they will request additional positions, additional personnel, whatever it may be. And if we can afford it, it will go through the normal budget process. It will be approved by the select board and finance committee, and then it will come before you folks at town meeting to approve the full budget. The position that this town is in at this point is that we cannot close that gap anymore. We have made reductions in all of our expense lines to the point where we need slightly over $2 million in order to close that gap. Linda, year after year, has been closing approximately a $500,000 gap. We're just at a point right now where we just can't do that. As far as the real estate tax part of this, a real estate tax is the amount of tax stated in terms of a unit of the municipal tax base. In Massachusetts, that is represented in dollars per thousand of assessed value. We will show you as the slideshow goes on what we can pull directly from the DLS website, and we can show you how to calculate your own tax, your own real estate tax, as well as what will be added on should this override pass at the state. It's important for everyone to understand that the numbers that we are going to go over tonight, and say this multiple times, are the known values that we can give to you tonight. It is the numbers we're going to give you is based solely on the additional cost for the override as we show it to you. The 2.5 part, as well as any additional taxes which happen based upon assessments and things like that. The way that the fiscal year works is it begins July 1 and it goes until June 30th. We are in fiscal year 26. It does not work via calendar year. It would be impossible for us to calculate what additional revenues the town is going to need, what additional assessments are going to happen from our assessors department and the 2.5%, because everyone's assessed value is different. So we can only calculate known values, and that's based upon these numbers that we're going to show you. Someone asked a great question the last time I made that same statement at the beginning of the meeting, and that was, when is the next real estate assessment? I did check with the assessor's office, and the next real estate assessment occurs at the end of October. And the state will approve the assessments by mid-November. So that was an excellent question that somebody had asked at the last meeting. All right. There are two different components of this override that we're going to be requesting. One of them is the general operations override, which has 3 parts, which we'll get into. And the other one is a capital maintenance override fund. They'll both be separate override votes. The way that this will work is that this will go to both of these items will go to a special town meeting. We are setting that for September 9th. Both of them must pass, or either one of them can pass, or neither of them can pass. If they both pass, then they go to a special election vote, which is where you go into a ballot box and you will check either one of the other or not. But they have to pass both in order for these to be enacted. An operational, the general operational override is essentially your day-to-day services. It's your essential operations for the town of Hadley. Your DPW, your fire and EMS, your police department, the folks who work here in the senior center, your library, your general operations of the town. Folks who work over in town hall, your tax collector, all of that. The other part of it is something that I think, and I think most people here agree, I think it was actually unanimous from both the select board and the finance committee when we were putting this suggestion together, is this town hasn't done a great job in taking care of the things that we build. We have maintenance funds in this town, but we don't have maintenance funds dedicated for proactive maintenance to take care of these beautiful buildings that we have. And unfortunately, because we are reactive about it, essentially all we do is fix things that break. We can't continue to do that. So essentially, one of the things that we'd like to do is to put together this secondary override request, which is for $300,000 specifically for capital and maintenance repairs and things like that. And again, please remember, both of them will have to pass separately in both places, town meeting and a ballot. So here's your operational, your general fund override request, $2,250,624. This is the like again, as I mentioned, there's going to be 3 parts to this. This is the first part. This is what is needed for a fire and EMS budget. The fire and EMS, the fire department for many years was not a 24/7 fire department. It was call force, part-time firefighters, and basically your fire chief and your deputy chief. In the last couple of years, the town has hired firefighters so that they are now 24/7. So you have a 24/7 full-time fire department, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. What's important to note is that the money to hire the additional personnel was never put into the budget. There's a number of reasons for that. The town was attempting to handle ambulance services at an advanced life support level. That has been put on pause. And ultimately, this is the money that is required to fund the fire department fully. 24/7 coverage. This amount of money is not currently. Half of our fire department is not funded after October of this year. Around October, November, half of the fire department is no longer funded. So that's important to know. That's the first part of the request. The second part of the request is $338,404 for the rest of the town departments. School and all of the other town departments need this amount of money to continue the operations as they are now. This is DPW, police, dispatch, all town hall departments, and again, the school. This bottom part is unfortunately something that was completely unforeseen. There are two parts to it. 2 months ago, maybe, we were notified that our town insurance would be increasing by this amount of money. It was a double-digit percentage increase. It required us to use free cash and make reductions in other places of the budget to come up with approximately $330,000 for health insurance. Then, about 2-3 weeks ago, July 30th, we were notified that they were increasing the health insurance by another 20%. For those of you who have read the newspaper recently, there are a number of communities that are dealing with this exact same increase. Our portion is $486,000. And they have warned us that on July 1 of FY27, in calendar year 26, to expect another double-digit increase. So the $824,404 is these two portions put together, and that is the second part of the operational request. Now here's the third part of the operational request. For those of you who read Linda's budget book, I think it's fantastic, but I would imagine that most folks don't dig deep into it. On the first couple of pages, one of the things that she talks about is revenues and expenses. Free cash is as a part of our town operational budget and has been used in a certain way for quite a long time. For many years, free cash was used to balance the budget. It was used to close that gap that I was talking about earlier. So departments will come in, they'll make their budget requests, they will argue for what it is that they want to increase, and the town administrator and the finance director will make reductions as they see fit based on spending and things like that. And then we'll work through the regular budget process of going through the finance committee and then going through the select board. If the budget increases, which are recommended, create a delta, essentially, and create a gap. Free cash was always utilized to close that gap. Over the course of the last several years, handful of years, I guess is probably more appropriate, the finance committee and the select board have been trying to reduce that amount of spending. We've been trying to use less and less free cash because free cash can be used for anything. It is undedicated funds. So you can use this if you get into trouble or if departments needed an increase for additional hours or additional personnel, and you don't have to increase taxes. If we have this money, we can utilize it for those purposes. Again, for those of you who read Linda's budget book, you are aware that we had to utilize all of the free cash just to balance the budget that we're currently in. So this budget cycle started on July 1st, 2025, a month and 2 weeks. And in order to put a balanced budget in front of the town populace at town meeting, all of that money was used. This is the third part of the request of the override, is to replenish these funds. Because unfortunately, we are looking at having a certified amount of free cash that's probably less than we've seen in 5 or 6 years. We're looking at $300,000 to $500,000 based on those estimations. I'll show you some of the free cash graphs and what we've gotten year to year as we move forward with this. So that's the third part of this. Obviously, that $330,000 in health insurance contributes to us having to use all of this free cash. Several years ago, probably 3 or 4 years ago, the select board started a compensation study what our employees are making based upon other comparable towns. And this did the additional raises for all of the employees across town outside of the schools. We have completed all of the union negotiations, and that contributed to having to use some of this money. And then we had to use the balance in free cash carried over from the prior year to balance the budget that we are currently in. This is just a snapshot really quick. Yes, sorry, I have a question. Yeah.
On part C here, for a $330,000 increase in health insurance, it's on the previous slide, you said that actually will increase to $486,000.
No, that's additional too.
That's in addition to that
Correct.
for financial year 26.
Yes. Yes. The $486,000, this one right here, is due October 1st of this year. This is a mid-year increase that no one expected.
If you watch the Gazette, it's like Belchertown is seeing, I think it's $1.1 million hit from this. I think there was a story about Whately the other day, was 700 something thousand. All the towns around here are part of this pool and are all getting zapped because of increased cost in the pool.
The other question I have is that this, I'm not sure how insurance works on a town-wide basis. But they said that I realize we're probably kind of stuck based on this financial year.
Yeah.
They said that we could look at another double-digit increase in the following year. Are there options with towns for insurance other than where the pool that we're currently in? And are there efforts already underway to do so?
Yeah, yes. One of the things, and there's another slide, is that this system that we're in has never done this before. In fact, it's been very, very small increases. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal a couple of weeks ago that all the major insurance companies are pushing probably 18% increases across the board to their direct customers. I usually saw 15% in my company, to go up every year. So everybody paying for healthcare is facing this, and we're hitting it because it's a self-insurance pool that's on through the all the communities in the valley.
Yes.
Last time you mentioned that a lot of the increase was due to claims for GLP-1. And so I heard that the insurance is now cracking down on that, and they will fund it for people who have diabetes. But they're really cracking down on it for and for municipal employees, so it's just, directly for the insurance that funds your municipal employees, so that there shouldn't be as much of a hike. So have you any comments about that? Should we see a reduction in some of these charges, and when might that figure that?
Lauren, you have any information on
I don't think we'll see a reduction. The medical portion of the claims, the high dollar claims, is what's causing insurance to increase so high. They've already addressed the pharmaceutical portion, but this increase is due to the medical increases.
What percentage do the employees pay towards medical insurance?
35?
35%.
There an option to increase that?
But most of the employees are in unions and will have a part in that. There will be an option, but it'll be something that will have to be there. Impact bargaining with them, probably until the contract is at its 3-year completion and then bargaining with them again. The most that we can do is 50%, they're required by law and cover 50%. Right now, we cover 65.
And that's low compared to other towns.
Quick question, how many employees are we talking about, not having?
114.
114, not including the school, actually.
Not including.
Yeah.
Okay. And second part, you said that, we haven't had this problem like in the last 5 years where the free cash has been depleted where, so like in the last 5 years, how many have we brought on an abundance of new employees or?
So unfortunately, I don't have numbers in the last 5 years, what I do have actually. 7 years, I have a 7-year figure right there for you, so jump ahead.
I'm sorry.
So David Nixon, when he was the town administrator here, he used to do a total FTE, which is basically a full-time equivalent. Your FTE calculation is over here on this side, and this includes full-time and part-time folks. Just to give you an example, the way that it's calculated is a full-time person working 40 hours a week is equivalent to 1 FTE. If you have a person who's working 20 hours a week, a part-time person, that's equivalent to a half of an FTE. On the right-hand side, that's how obviously we calculate the actual positions and people that were added. So in FY19, 7 years ago, we had 65.44 FTEs, we had 85 people working for the town essentially, again, not including the schools. 7 years later, we have 87.59 FTEs for a total of 114 personnel. Again, not including the schools. So in a 7-year time span, the town has added an additional 29 individuals that full-time and part-time across all town departments. Probably 21 or 22 different town departments. While we're bringing up the school, just really quickly, there was one thing that I wanted to discuss in speaking with the superintendent. When it comes to budgetary requests for the school, added staffing, things like that. This year, the school department requested approximately a 2.99% budget increase. We were only able to fund a 1.3% budget increase. Part of this override is to be able to give them some of that money back, to fund them more appropriately. Their budget over the course of the last handful of years has increased on average between 3 and 5%. This past budget cycle, their budget increased by 5.4%. Again, we were able to fund 1.34% of that budget for the school. So they had to this current fiscal year use about $400,000 more in their school choice funding that they have than they have used in previous years. Over the course of since FY18, the town of Hadley has allocated less and less to the schools. We have gone from 44% to 40% to 39%, 38, 37, 35. We are also the second lowest contributor to the schools out of Amherst, Belchertown, East Hampton, Granby, Hatfield, Northampton, and South Hadley. Since FY20, the school utilized $675,000 of their school choice money in FY20. In FY26, this current budget cycle, they have had to use $1,556,841 in their school choice money to balance their budget. So it's important to understand that every department is affected, even though, again, we don't have specific numbers on staff and things like that for the school. Yes.
So what is that school choice money for? would it just accumulate or, I mean, they have to use it, but what is it for?
I don't know all of the other reasons that they use that school choice money. What I can tell you is that, from speaking with the superintendent. Using it to balance their budget is not necessarily what they're used for, and it's not sustainable. They'll continue to have to use that money as we keep getting lower in funding them. And if,
The town side's been lucky in that the school has been using school choice, for a lot of their capital. Needs, so that we don't have to then fund it through the town side. And they, I think, came up with, 3 years ago with a 20-year capital plan. And much of that was intended to come out of their, school choice and other options that they have. But now that they need to spend so much more of school choice on the budget, they will be turning to the town for more borrowing to do their repairs and other capital upgrades at school. So we benefited from their school choice, even though it feels sometimes like they're getting that extra money, they don't get that on the town side. But we benefit when they use it and don't ask us to help them out.
one of the things that the superintendent mentioned, was that. Oftentimes it's used when they have unanticipated expenses, for example, out of district special education tuitions. Which can be over $100,000 for one student. Homeless transportation can run between $10,000 and $88,000 per student. So they use it somewhat like a stabilization account. They have unanticipated costs. They'll use it for that. We have been reducing their budget requests annually, so they've been having to use it every single year to basically continue their operations. So, this budget sheet here is just another way of looking at everything that I just explained. The grayed out column is for the FY 26 budget voted in May of 2025. The clear column is the requests that came from, or the necessary spending, as in the health insurance costs, which came from the department heads after we passed this budget. Ultimately, the department heads came to us and they said, we're not gonna be able to continue our operations essentially into FY 27. Some of them may not be able to make it through FY 26. So we put them all through a second budget process. We sat down with Linda and myself, and we had them justify their needs, and we then brought those numbers to the finance committee and to the select board again. The health insurance increase was nothing, and there's nothing anyone could do about that. That number is what that number is. The other numbers have been reduced outside of the free cash number. So we did sit down with the fire department, we did make more reductions to his expense lines. And that number is essentially bare bones on what he needs to fund his staffing to move forward with the 24/7 fire department. The 338,404 was again cut back and reduced to that number, and that's based on school and all of the other departments in town. This is kind of a snapshot of each general department. It goes by the hundreds, so you're not gonna see each department specifically called out. Public safety includes police, fire, dispatch and inspections. So they're all kind of lumped into one. General government includes essentially all of the town hall departments, plus the libraries, council on aging, things like that. And so those numbers on the right-hand side in the clear are what I just showed you based upon department, about what their requested needs were. And again, bear in mind that the fire department, as far as public safety, is a number that had never been introduced into the budget in the past. Here is the capital stabilization fund request. And again, we went over a little bit earlier what this funding is for. Ultimately, what the goal would be is to be able to utilize cash. And purchase things with cash and fix things with cash, as opposed to borrowing. We do a lot of projects around town, we make a lot of purchases around town for equipment, for vehicles, for massive building repairs and things like that. Which Linda has to put through a borrowing process. This would hopefully put us in a position where when the 2.5s, the Prop 2.5 begins to get added to it annually. We'll be able to buy more things with cash. Again, the total on this is the $300,000, that's what you will see at town meeting. This is kind of a snapshot of the tax rate from here in Hadley from 2003 to 2025. Those 3 items on top were added based upon some great questions that we got. And I think the first or the second public hearing we did. The highest that it's been was in 2004. That's when the 2 buildings were built, the Hadley Elementary School and the Public Safety Complex. That was a debt exclusion, which increased the taxes to pay for those buildings. In 2008, it was the lowest the tax rate was, and as you can see, there's kind of a gradual dip and then a gradual increase. That's likely due to lower assessed values. And then in 2025, all the way down there on the end is where we are at currently. $11.63. Okay, so what is going to happen to the tax rate if the entire override passes? The general override is $2,250,624. The capital maintenance override is $300,000 for a total of $2,550,624. This will increase the tax rate from that $11.63 to $13.57 should the entire override pass. And again, this is only the override numbers. These are only the known numbers that we can calculate. This is showing folks where Hadley is with all of these other towns in Hampshire County, save Sunderland, which is in Franklin County. Hadley is at $11.63 for your tax rate in comparison to all these other towns. And this is where Hadley would be if the entire full override passes. Sunderland would still be below us, but again, Sunderland is the only community that is not in our county. What's going to happen to my tax bill if we pass your override? And again, just a reminder, this is only the override. If you go on mass.gov, you can do these calculations yourself. You can go from, I believe it goes all the way down to 150,000, all the way up to over $1 million in assessed value. The reason that we picked these 3 is to not clutter the screen, and also the average assessed value in Hadley is $459,000. So we picked that one and put it in the middle, just to show folks on average or a median of what the taxes would look like if you pass the entire override of $2.5 million. Your current tax bill, tax rate is $11.63, it would go up to $13.57. So the difference for a $350,000 assessed value is $679 annually, $56 a month. For the median here, it's an increase of $873 or $72 a month approximately. And for 550, it's $1,067, $88 a month. And again, if you go on mass.gov, look under just go to the search bar and enter property tax calculator. It will bring you up to this screen. All you have to do is click the drop down, find Hadley. It will put all of the accurate numbers for Hadley in there for you, and you can enter any number you like into the override calculations or the override calculator, and it will give you these numbers based upon all of the assessed values up to $1 million. There's also a way that's calculated on that one pager that you have If you don't want to use the calculator, read it from the back of that page. So, what is free cash? I think Linda explained this better than I did last time. You want to go into it? So how about I do the general? Okay, so free cash are the remaining unrestricted funds from the operations from the previous year. So if a department didn't spend all of the money that they were granted, it goes back to the town coffers. Okay, that's free cash. There are a number of types of funds that are restricted. So we talked about, at one of the meetings, we talked about CPA. CPA funds are restricted funds that only be used for certain purposes. Forfeiture funds for the police department. We can only use them for a certain type of purchase. Free cash, it's kind of what it sounds like. Essentially, these are unrestricted and they are returns from previous budgets as well as receipts in excess of the revenue estimated on the tax recap sheet. There are some things which reduce our free cash certification. So essentially, sometimes the town will have certain liabilities that will reduce the certification of free cash. So if we have significant abatements out there, meaning we have to return money to folks for taxes that they paid that they didn't have to pay, things like that will reduce your free cash with Mass DOR.
Sure, yeah, this, so I always think of it primarily as the money that comes back from departments, we call them rollbacks, if they haven't spent their money, so it comes back in. And we get to spend it again, or allocate it again, and excess. If you go to the next slide, that actually shows a good example, it really is what's been happening with free cash over the years. We're going back to 20, which was our first COVID year. We ended that year, I think we really started seeing impact of COVID in February or March. That's about when town employees were sent home and other places too. Our free cash at the end of that year was 33,154. That was a little lower than what it had been the years before. It usually was coming in $500,000 to $700,000. That was very average. Then we got the ARPA supplement coming in for 21. So the way Hadley used it is the way really it was intended, which is to replace our lost revenue during pandemic. And so that is what we used it for, and the main replacement was a rooms tax and meals tax, which we are highly dependent on. And so those industries were hit very hard during the pandemic, and we lost a lot of revenue during that time, which we then replaced with ARPA funds. And we did that for 2 years in a row. Then when they started coming back, the business started coming back, and we got more money out of the rooms and meals tax. And other areas of revenue, there was a lot more building permits. People were staying home and fixing their homes up or adding an extension or something. We were really experiencing an excess because the revenues were coming in higher than we had to project our revenues very conservatively. And then they were coming in, and the rooms and meals not only came back to where they were, but they really zipped past it pretty quickly. So we had 2 or 3 years there where we were doing very well with free cash at the end of the year, where the revenue was coming in much higher than we were projecting, and also the expenditures were staying fairly stable. So each of those years, the 13, 17, 13, think of those as the balance in your checkbook at that point. That you don't add them up and say, oh, that's $3 million, $4 million, where did it go? The balance that we had left over was 1.3, and the next year we came in a little higher, and then we were back down again. Last year we were down at about $1 million. This year we're expecting it to be or in the $500,000 range, maybe even a little lower. We have a number of things we haven't factored in yet. So as you can see, going back to 20, we're really settling back down to where we had been in prior years, and we therefore can no longer expect that we're going to have 800,000 against the budget. So that's the situation we're dealing with. And so now what do we do? And here we are.
What did she explain better than me? Okay, stabilization fund, what is the stabilization fund? Stabilization fund can most easily be described as kind of a rainy day, fund, an emergency fund. Things that are unexpected. They can be used for any lawful purpose, and the only stipulation is that town meeting gets to decide what we use our stabilization fund on. Over the course of the last 2 town meetings, I believe, possibly 3. We have used the stabilization to fund those fire department positions that we talked about earlier. Which is why we require the operational money to be able to put them into the operational budget, fund them. As they should have been. This is your stabilization fund balances. One thing I do want to point out is that that last number actually should be lower based upon what we've spent over the course of the last few years. However, Linda, as I mentioned in other meetings, Linda makes all of our investment decisions, and she's made really good investments. That fund is actually growing. When we first started these discussions with our finance team, which is comprised of multiple finance committee members, multiple select board members, finance director, the collector, override. We're basically put back what we had spent. But it turns out that, you know, in reviewing this and with the increases that we're getting on Linda's investments, it's one of the things that we can back off on, allow the investments to, come to fruition, so to speak. What is the capital stabilization fund? I was unaware, when we first started putting this slideshow together, that we actually already have the fund that we're going to be putting the money into if you grant us the override. In 2010, this stabilization fund was established. My guess is that it was established from folks from the finance committee who were sick of having discussions about building buildings and then not taking care of them. Unfortunately, as you can see, when we first established it, we had a whopping $118 in there, and we didn't really do much over the course of the next few years to increase that. And up until last fiscal year, we had about $56,552 in there. Giving our finance committee, our select board, and our maintenance people who keep an eye on these buildings that we're building, giving them an amount of money like we're talking about right now will actually make a difference, which will be taken care of and extending the life of what we're doing. So believe it or not, there is some good news. You know, it's probably subjective. But this override is not going to add any more positions. There is no department out there, even though several departments did advocate for additional, potentially additional positions based on what their workload is. This override does not do that. This override is going to get us back to 0. Okay. We have maintained our bond rating. That is in no small part due to the finance committee, the select board, and Linda. That is something that has been maintained at a AAA bond rating for 6 years. And we have not had any layoffs or service cuts, including during COVID. And it's important to remember that the people that have been in charge of your town, you know, obviously they've only been in this position for about a year. But the people who have been here doing this job have been able to do these things with something important to know. We do have one more public hearing, and again, we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end. I just want to show post the dates. There's one more public forum. We do coffee with a cop once a month here at the senior center, and we're going to be stealing that date because I'm kind of a cop still. So we're gonna do it at 2 p.m. right here, same place. That's the Thursday at 2 p.m. We're gonna have it set up the exact same way for anyone to come. It's not just for seniors who come to coffee with the cop, it's for anybody. And again, this is the date for your special town meeting. The reason that there's two specials there is just because we already have a special town meeting. And whether this override, well, I shouldn't say whether it passes or fails. If the override fails, we absolutely still need to have another town meeting in October, potentially early November, to determine where the reductions are gonna come. We have a gap that we have to close somehow, someday. So if the override passes, then what we showed you tonight are the intended means, the intended places that we're gonna be putting those finances. And if it does not pass, we have the second special in there is for this meeting, and then we'll have our normal special town meeting in, again, late October, early November. You have to have it before the tax rate is set, which is usually, yes.
Hi, could you please explain what would happen if it doesn't pass? What are the steps that the town has to take?
Well, we have to pay the health insurance. We don't have any choice on that, so we have to pay the health insurance. If none of the override passes, half of the fire department salaries are cut from the budget. We will need almost $500,000 for the health insurance costs, which will still remain. And all of the other line items that we went over, the $330,000 for all of the rest of the town departments, that would be cut as well. And we will have to close the gap from our current staff. When we did the 2 budget run throughs, we cut as much as we possibly could from the department expense lines. There are wage lines and there are expense lines. We tried to salvage employee jobs as best we can. And so we cut as much as we possibly could, or at least what we felt was appropriate from expense lines. With numbers that large, there will be no other place to reduce costs but from personnel. I can't tell you where the cuts would come from at this point, because the select board makes those decisions. But I think Molly said it well last time, it would probably be very widespread. Try to spread it out so that the services for the town of Hadley would remain as intact as possible. But again, we're talking about just the health insurance and that free cash amount that we would need to get us into FY 28. That's $1 million. And those are monies that this town needs to be able to, we have to pay the health insurance, and I think it's foolhardy to not approve that free cash amount. So, because we're looking at another health insurance increase. Now, the problem is that when we start laying people off, we then have to calculate the costs of unemployment. We have to cover. And if you're gonna lay off in public safety or DPW, still gotta get your roads plugged, still gotta get your folks that get picked up off the ground when they fall, you still need people to do CPR, you still need your roads policed, so there's gonna be overtime costs that are gonna be incurred. We won't even know what those, how to calculate those until we see where the reductions would happen.
Just to add to that too, the other challenge we have, and I think you can see this, where it's played out in other municipalities who, have had failed override attempts. That, it's a very public thing, keep reading newspapers, so the other concern we have is that, with this wage study, which is part of our financial challenge right now, because of the pay increases. We finally got ourselves up to the point where Hadley is at kind of middle of the road, if you will, relative to municipal pay structure. If we put ourselves in a situation which, as Mike said, is inevitable, we're gonna have layoffs, et cetera. We're gonna become less attractive as an employer. So then, it just sets off a series of unfortunate events, if I can put it that way. So we'll try to be as judicious as possible. and making the cuts, but everybody's gonna feel, there's no question. And then the other thing I just wanted to add too is Mike was talking about the school department. And the reliance on, the more and more reliance on the school choice money. That, that's, you know, the 130,000 we're talking about this year. But if we get into the next fiscal year. I think the schools are gonna find themselves in a much more difficult position, so. I think parents may be like, okay, that doesn't sound like the schools are getting cut too much now, maybe that's not so bad. Without this override, as we roll forward, they're gonna feel it pretty hell. So I just wanna be clear on that too, and we're actually having that tri-board meeting. Then well, since we've had school department come in, to select board and finance committee, so we can talk through that, so they're clear about as well.
I want to commend you on this excellent presentation. You clearly articulated the extreme need to pass the override. I want to thank the select board for their raising this issue and discussing it and supporting it. I want to thank the finance committee for their work in analyzing and supporting the request. And of course, Linda Sanderson always keeps an excellent eye on money management. I have two questions. The first is, we all read about the pending imposition of federal tariffs. How is that going to further exacerbate Casual's financial situation?
I can't answer that specifically, but I can tell you is the only problem that I have foreseen in the very near future is that we do apply for some federal grants, federal aid. And we apply for some state monies which are backed by federal resources. We recently got a legal opinion from our attorneys, which noted that if we are not in compliance with some of the new federal requirements, DEI policies and things like that, that we will be ineligible for those funds. But I can't answer the question specifically on tariffs. I don't know if anyone else can, but I can tell you that there's going to be a risk to some federal grants as we move forward.
The other question I have is, if the override should pass, how many years can you project that we will go without needing another override?
I don't know that anybody could have projected the massive jump in inflation that we have seen over the course of the last handful of years. I certainly don't think anyone could project the increases in the health insurance costs. Outside of those factors, I'm very confident that if we get ourselves back to zero. We get ourselves back to zero, that would be 2.5s will put us in a position to succeed. We will need that free cash flow, because we're not looking at getting those types of numbers for quite some time.
Well, I'd like to say a couple of things. This process to go for an override has been something that's been discussed among these committees for months, since before we passed the last budget. And when we started on it, you can take out the health, which is 330 and 478 or 480. Okay, we never anticipated we'd be at this kind of number. And in fact, when we originally were talking about it, we were hoping to have the second portion of it closer to 500 for maintenance and capital. Because as you can imagine, when fire trucks cost $2 million, when heating systems and air conditioning systems cost, a lot of money to replace roofs and such, it's going to take us a while to catch up when we're just putting $300,000 aside for the number of buildings that we own. So we were kicking around 500,000. Okay, we've had to shrink that down. Everything's turned into a compromise. I can tell you that I talk to people around town and I bump into a lot of people and they go, oh, but they overspent, they bought this piece of equipment, or they did this, or they did that. And the only thing I can say to that, and nobody's brought that up here today, is you're going to crash the whole town because you perceive they overspent or misspent on some item. That's a really dangerous thing to do when this is where you live. Okay, that's how I feel about that. I personally am going to have a huge hit from this. I own commercial property in town. I own some residential lots and I also have a house. That's above the average by the assessment. Okay, and I'm gonna end up with a lot of new money going out of my household to pay for this. I'm not happy about that. But I feel a responsibility to someone in this town that has adopted this town, that I wanna see, the reason I love living is because we have the Route 9, what I call New Jersey. Okay, and then we saved everything else. Okay, we still have rural, we still have marine. Okay, and we've made a lot of great decisions. They've kept, I shouldn't say we, because I've only been on this committee for 5 years. Go back to the tax rate if you would. They've kept their taxes low artificially by using something that could have been put aside and should have been put aside for capital, which is free cash. If you go to the state site, that's what they tell you. We went to a forum that we actually hosted in this room a few months ago of the Massachusetts Association of Finance Committee, I think that's what it's called. And you know what they said? Free cash shouldn't be used the way we've been using it. They said, you guys need a capital, you should be raising money for capital, you should be putting that money aside. But we didn't do that here. We kept your taxes low because we had this abundance of money and it was like, well, okay, we got, you know, at the end of the year, we have $1 million, why can't we use 700 or 800 of it? Okay, and we've done it, and we've all profited from that. We can't go back in time and raise the taxes retroactively so that we have a much bigger pool of money here. We've hit the wall here. So think about it. If you turn down this override, okay, if you turn it down, we'll be back next year saying we have no money, we have to do more layoffs. Because it's not gonna get less expensive to run this town, even with less people, even with the department cutting hair, even with less fire people, I should say. It's gonna keep getting more expensive. What we're trying to do is do a reset, and we can't guarantee you that we won't be back in 10 years or 15 years. We're hoping that increases in our local revenues will go up. We have the planning department is looking at the zoning regulations that we have to try and find ways to tweak and attract more businesses, more other types of investments in this town, such as senior housing projects. That has brought in a lot of revenue. We're not gonna get out of them all. Okay, maybe we can get cost of it, okay, but you know, we have other spaces that can be developed, or we may have to tweak our laws to make it easier for some of these businesses to come in and pay a tax revenue, which is where our free cash will grow. But if we don't pass this thing, we're in deep trouble here, because this problem is going to get worse in 27 and 28. It's not going to get better. You're buying a solution to save yourself an increase now, and you're going to see this town's fiscal foundation go away. That's the problem. We are really up against the wall here. And what we wanted to do was start to put money aside for capital so we don't have to borrow every time. It doesn't mean we're not going back borrowing for certain things at town meetings. You all voted for all these things. Building we're in, the library, fire truck, equipment for DPW, we all voted. This is not a town where we have a mayor and a town board that just gets to spend the money the way they want. They have come to you for almost everything. And I've seen some fights and found, I've never seen anything like it. I mean, I lived in Northampton place. To see a town, a body of people show up for a meeting and say, oh, vote down things that I vote seem pretty reasonable sometimes. So the electorate is tight with the money. We've been tight with the money, but we're out of room. We really need to get this pushed through. When we passed the budget when we passed the last budget at the town meeting? May. We didn't fund, what, about 20% of the town? We held back.
We made a request.
A request to make a balanced budget because we knew we needed to do an overrun. That's gonna hit at the special town meeting, not the special. If these overrides don't, we're gonna have to come up with that money or start making drastic cuts. And I didn't want to see us come into these meetings and say, okay, this building's gonna close 4 days a week. Okay, I don't want to get into scare tactics. I think everybody's intelligent enough here to know that if you have a budget that's this big and you have to take this much out of it, there's gonna be a lot of pain. we're gonna then have to go and figure out where that gain's gonna be. And I don't think that's something the town really wants to do. I think we have great services, I think our taxes are still. You go to the next one. They're gonna be the lowest in the county. You know, it's like we're in number one position and we need to get credit for that. You know, we're winning a race against other towns on spending, and we're doing that because we have these income. You know, we have this corridor that pays for a lot of it, but also because we've been very tight with money. And so I think this is where we need to go. Nobody wants a tax increase. But I think it's time we have to face the reality that we're doing fun. Thank you. Sir.
Linda had mentioned that room and meal tax plays an important part of the revenue from the New Jersey Strip. But yet in the last month, couple of months or so, the Kyle Lodge has been sold to a nonprofit, and turning it into, I'm not sure what. And Mr. Roberts has bought the old Howard Johnson and turning that into a long-term residence. My question to the select board is, what are you doing to preserve the New Jersey Strip? With these two type of, let's say, action. I know the planning board was not wholeheartedly in backup. So you need to maintain what we've got, but yet these are two establishments that have gone away as far as meals and lodging.
I'll start. So both of those buildings were sold under the condition that they would never be allowed to be a hotel again. So that's out of the town's control. So they will still have real estate values. Right, but we won't be able to collect the rooms tax that we could have. The Econo Lodge wasn't doing very well as a hotel, and I don't think the Howard Johnson was either. The Econo Lodge, I think, is a done deal in that Valley CDC bought it. They're going to turn it into low income housing. Right now, it's a Craig store, I believe, but that's for a short period. They're going to start working on creating what they originally intended to do with it. And again, it will have real estate value. The Howard Johnson situation is not clear at this point what's gonna end up being there. Now, as you said, Mr. Roberts wants it to be an extended stay. The planning board's not sure that that's appropriate because we don't have an allowance for that in our bylaw. So they've sent that to town council to give us an opinion as to what the status of that can be. And there may be room for negotiation in there that says, hey, you took a hotel away from us. If you want us to allow you to do this, then you're gonna have to make some kind of payment to us because it's no longer gonna be able to be a hotel.
And just to add to what Randy's already communicated, in other municipalities, it's very common to have a town plan. So another thing that's unique to have is we have a planning board, and they're looking at us, right? So we have a committee, called Housing and Economic Development Committee, but it's certainly not as effective and proactive as having somebody full-time really focused on these types of things. So I think we've done a pretty good job kind of trying to fill that gap in the absence of that position. And working with the planning board on zoning, so the 40R, for example, that they're looking at right now. They're trying to be proactive and think about the future of retail on Route 9. And we just saw it during COVID, right? I mean, things change pretty rapidly in the economic sphere. So I just want to say, that's being pursued right now. And we are also having conversations with the current owners of the mall to talk about what their future plans might be. So just want people to know that conversations are taking place. We're not just sitting around waiting to see what's going to happen.
Okay. Planner, each student. Enterprises under the rug. And lost all the, records from.
No, I think Randy answered that, both of those hotels actually were, underperforming to say the least. So the amount of revenue that we were receiving from the Econo Lodge and the Howard Johnsons had been on the decline for quite a while. So, and again, we have to respect people's ownership rights. So the previous owner of those two properties, it was within his legal right to do what he did, if he could find a willing participant on the other end of the transaction. But what I am saying is that, again, I think in the spirit of us being frugal, that's an area that we didn't go down. We did not hire a planner or an economic development person. And I think, again, we've done pretty well even despite that. But down the road, that's still something that I would love to see us be able to work. I think you've done so well.
And my hope is that when they do rehab the Econo Lodge, that would increase its value, real estate value, so that we could collect more taxes. Neither one of them is going to be a tax into that situation. They're still going to have to pay real estate taxes on their assessed value. And water and sewer.
Thanks for the Thanks for the presentation. I'm worried about the size of the increase, quite frankly. I think, I'm worried about young families and seniors that, $600, $800, $1,000 per year is a big ask for people on a fixed income or young families. And the price of housing in Hadley is very high, and part of that is because the tax rate is so low, people like the low tax. I don't deny that costs have gone up. I mean, I'm a budget person, that's what I do for a living. I think asking for this amount of money in one tax increase is a lot for people to handle. I think part of that is maybe we were kicking the can down the road by using free cash and not addressing like an ongoing problem over the last few years. And now people have to eat it all in one big jump. So I'm worried about that. I think housing is becoming extremely unaffordable and exclusive. And I don't like it personally.
Well, I think everybody here would agree with you. The one thing I will disagree with you on is the fact that these house prices are high, the tax rate is low, gives you X amount of dollars for your tax bill. Go to a surrounding town who's got a double our tax rate and their house prices are half, the tax bill is still the same. So,
I understand.
yeah,
that.
and
Now
they were
people
just
are
saying,
paying twice as much for the house,
Right.
and they're paying a higher tax rate. So people who came in last year and bought a house because the tax rate is low, the young family, well, guess what? Now their tax bill is $1,000 more. And for some people that might, that might be okay. And it's not, people don't want to pay that. I'm just worried about the people that can't pay it. One of the things that, and believe me, it's not lost on us as part of the conversation we've had too. And the question is, do we try to take this in a couple of bites? Was that a better solution than just ripping the Band-Aid off, so to speak? So I think one of the things that we try to do is, we've talked to the collector's office to say, look, there are going to be some situations where people who were previously comfortably were able to pay those tax payments, they may be strapped. And our collector's office is very willing to work with people on budgeting payment plans, especially the younger families that you're talking about who, maybe they haven't been in their home 2-3 years now, and all of a sudden, bam, that payment's going by that amount. And in terms of people who are on fixed or lower incomes, I think we're going to try to do a better job getting messaging out about a program that I never can remember the code. Super on scale travels about, but there is a program that's not asset based, it's strictly income based. And we only had one or two people in the entire town taking advantage of it. And, you know, I don't know if it's in people's tax returns, but I have to think there are probably many more people who do qualify. They've just never applied for that. And it's a fixed amount, I mean, without $175, I think it's $1 not off of the tax bill. But I think we're gonna try to be more proactive in getting that word out to people so that people have options. If that can be helpful in any way.
Hi, Ken Parker, we've been here 46 years. When is that new building behind your establishment and coming on Texas?
The hotel?
Yeah.
The hotel, it's the hotel, excuse me. Mr. Farmer can answer that.
I don't know when, we have been paying taxes since, even when we're under construction, so the tax payments have never ceased since during that. In terms of occupancy taxes, those are being, I guess, sent to the town with monthly. So those are already being recognized.
We already have a lot of people.
Yes, we opened in March of this year, and the town probably already seen $80,000, $100,000 of taxes being sent over already.
Can you go back to the previous, or whatever our tax revision is now?
Oh.
And yes, please, thank you. And I know that everybody's saying, you know, look how great this is, but actually it's only 11.63. But we've been using, which you're saying is the Jersey corridor, that I don't believe we have an income problem, we have a spending problem, even though we have Route 9. And we're at our lowest, we are still in debt, so to me, that is a spending problem. Knowing that, what does Route 9 generate for income for us? 25%, 30% of our income, which is allowing us to have this low taxes. And I know you were saying, Paul was saying because of, you know, it's gonna be hit people's personal property, the real estate tax, it trickles down. And I can't think that anybody's gonna say that if their rent or if their property for the house that they're living in, if that property tax is going up, I believe your rent is gonna be going. So if you have property you're renting right now, or commercial property that you're, you know, whatever small business in, if that property is going up, I believe your rent is gonna be going up too. So that's my thought on that. Yes, my house is gonna be going up $1,000, but then you have your assessment values that's going up every single year. So not only is your value going up or because of this tax increase, but your assessment value is also going up every single year or more going into your taxes or your assessment values.
So just to address that, you know, the spending problem versus the revenue. You know, I just want to remind everybody too, one of the things that we spent a lot of time talking about and reminding people of is that, you know, we used to refer to Route 9 as the Lake Golden Egg for Hadley, right? Because when those hotel and meals taxes first came into being by law, we were a huge beneficiary of that. And quite frankly, we were having conversations about, are we gonna need an override? And, you know, like manna from heaven, the state passed the legislative act that allowed us to collect those hotel and meals taxes. So it was a brand new revenue source. Then the campus revenue came in. So, you know, incrementally, there have been these new revenue sources, and then, you know, they take a lot. And we're hoping at some point, maybe we'll be able to have an increase hotel and meals taxes on the table right now. It's not gonna be voted on anytime soon from what we understand from our legislators. But the point being, you know, there's another expression, you have to sometimes spend money to make money. And in order for us to benefit from Route 9, we have to support Route 9. And what that means is that if you compare another municipality that has a comparable population of 5,000 people, and they don't have a Route 9, well, building inspections department is probably pretty small, the fire department is probably very comfortably. Functioning with a call force and maybe a couple of personnel, police departments certainly much smaller. Right, so there's a lot of costs that's associated with supporting that golden, egg of Route 9 to bring that revenue in, so. Again, sometimes people forget about that, that there is cost associated with us benefiting from putting, more than I think a third of the tax burden on the commercial base.
I'd also like to address the spending problem, because I don't think we got to spend the whole. I think there's room for improvement in anybody's budget. And we're looking at that all the time. Okay, we had a meeting earlier today about some issues related to future spending, how we would deal with certain types of things. But what we have is this building. I don't think that's a spending problem. I think it was something that's long overdue. When I moved to town, we brought my in-laws actually moved to this town first. And, they were in the other building with the mold, with the darkness, and then they come here. We have a new library for people. We buy equipment to keep your roads clear, to dig up your pipes when they burst. Okay, that takes money. And we have some old equipment and we are gonna replace it. We're online for a new fire truck. We have a water system with a big tank that needs to be replaced. $9 million. We all voted for it. Is that a spending problem? I don't think so. I think that's taking care of what we need to take care of. In fact, we had to appropriate, was it $9 million for the tank?
Yes,
In order.
without considering the equipment.
Right,
Yeah.
okay. To apply for the grant for $3 million, which we got turned down for initially. I think we're looking for more funds because our tax rate's so low and our fees for water were so low, and we don't have enough money in our reserve account. That they said, you guys don't need it. We didn't qualify. We're too rich. Compared to other communities. Okay, I know it sounds funny, but that's what it is. Okay, we are all volunteers here. And we're doing, I think, a great job for this town, but it's a lot of time and it's a lot of work. And we're at the end of our rope with funding. And we need the town to come together for this. As painful as it will be, it's a one-time shot. We'll never come, it's been what, 30 years, somebody told me?
Since they've asked.
Since they've asked for an override. The only other times they've been in town for something beyond the 2.5 has been for specific items like this building, the fire truck and things like that. And by the way, when we talk about the fire department being 24/7, we not only have a fire department that's 24/7, but those individuals who work as our fire detectives are also our second call ambulance. So in between fires or calls for the fire department, they do a lot of things besides just fires, car accidents and such. Those folks are available for our second call ambulance. Unfortunately, we thought we'd get more revenue out of that, and it just hasn't been. And that's why we stopped going for the ALS, and that's why we want to put it back into the budget. Rather than cut it out.
If this override passes. What kind of, are there already plans in the works to prevent us getting in the same situation in the next 5 years, 10 years? Or are we just gonna keep on going for an override? What's the plan here? Is there gonna be a hiring? Is there going to be, for 5 years, is there going to be, equipment that's not gonna be bought in the next 5 years?
Okay, so I will say this, we're working on things already to try to reduce costs. Not one of us up here has enjoyed this process of going through this, and I really don't wanna do it again. So if there's a way, we can make it. The need for an override not happen again, I hope we can find it sooner than later.
Yeah, the other thing I'd add to that, Brady said, we definitely have been, looking at how we're doing the forecasting for expenditures. I mean, what you can see here is, that medical
No, that, and completely unforeseen, and that's been, I get it, completely understand, I mean, get it, you've all been told this by
Right.
all folks for the board, so.
Yeah, but I think reliance on free cash is
Yeah.
a huge one. And again, it was, you know, a path that we started on, we kept trying to peel ourselves back from. And to
Yeah.
Randy's point, I think everybody on the finance committee and the select board, we are so committed to not.
And you're just, you did that on side, yeah, totally, totally understand. And Mike, thank you so much for this, is this presentation available for everybody? I see, you know, you said you're changing it every, it gets a little
Yeah,
better.
slightly. Not too much, we've only, like I said, when we've had great questions, comments, concerns,
Yeah.
things like that, we made some small adjustments, but. It's on every agenda for each one of these meetings, so you can actually go back to the first one and see the changes that have been made. And it'll be on this Thursday's agenda as well. So yeah, we can get them, just like we'll get a select board agenda.
My question is, this only gonna be, 1 year, or is gonna be next year and the year after and the year after, so it's gonna be another $700 next year, another 700 on top of that the next year, it's just gonna keep going on and on and on.
So this is a permanent tax increase. And then after that tax increase, because of the Prop 2.5 part of it, it will increase by 2.5, your taxes will increase by 2.5 annually, just like they would currently. This is a permanent tax increase that will go to effect.
So, like within a few years, your taxes are gonna be double what they are now. Is what it essentially amounts to.
No. It'll go up by 2.5 next year, but the increase of it, let's say $700 this year. That'll be, your tax bill will be the same after that increase plus 2.5%. So, the other thing with the tax increase, that your taxes is that as more businesses, more houses get built, your taxes will actually go down because it's a pool. So we're, the 2.5 doesn't say your house, your individual taxes go up 2.5%. It means the town can collect 2.5% extra year over year. So as more houses get built, as revenues from meals tax, occupancy tax, fees, those offset some of the increase in budgets, the taxes might stabilize. Or if we have substantial growth in commercial activity, then it might actually go down. Because as you can see over the years, I think there was a chart that showed the rate. You can see the taxes, it's not the same rate year over year, it changes, and that's because the amount of money that's collected might increase, but it's a pool that everybody puts into it. Your portion might be less next year than year before.
Well, as far as I can see, when I look around town, they're running out of places to plant new houses.
Well,
You know, they're taking good farmland that should be used for farming, and they're putting houses on it. So eventually you're gonna not be able to have your taxes go down. I mean, why don't they just make all the businesses on Route 9, whether it's car dealerships or hotels or restaurants, and there's plenty of them. Why don't they pay more of the taxes than the private residential houses? There's a lot of people, and it's not just the young families or the elderly that are on, you know, a very tight budget. You know, if it's one person paying all the taxes, all of, you know, your electric bill and whatever, it's not an easy thing to do. And it's not like, a lot of people don't have extra money to just pay out for tax, that's all I'm saying, you know. And you can only work so many hours in a week, whether you're working full-time and a part-time job, to try to get by.
I will say this, you know, we run a family business. We don't have, I've been in this town for now my family, I grew up here, I've been here since I was 10 years old. I worked at my family's business since I was 10 years old. So it's, to me, it's no different than anybody working on a farm. And then the people that have farms, they've benefited from that as well as we have. And they're also commercial rate. So if you want to go and increase Route 9, and you want to increase my family's taxes, which we pay a lot more than you do. Probably most people here combined, what we pay in taxes from all of our commercial property, just in real estate taxes. Then I have a problem with that, because that's not the town that my family came here. And that's not the town that we worked hard to build something. And if you go down the Tandem Bagels, the Gregory's, all of those people, they're individual small business. They're not living in, giant mansions and doing all these things. So there's a lot of small businesses on Route 9 that survive because of the low taxes, not because of volume. The kids go away, you can go into any restaurant in the summer, there's no line, there's nobody there. It's not that easy for businesses. Yes, Walmart's there, Target's there, and all of them, but there's a lot of more smaller people up and down Route 9 that don't make it, that do struggle. And this would just only increase their burden. So I do have a problem with that. But the other fact is the planning board and through all the zoning changes are trying to increase the density of residential on Route 9. So that we do have. We just passed this year in May through the town meeting. My family came up with basically the over 55 overlay of the new district to go and increase the density so we can have more apartments or over 55 people that will not go and increase the services to the school system and other things. So that can increase property values to go and collect more taxes. So, Peter says there's a spending issue. You know what? There might be some spending issue. Is there $2.5 million worth of spending issue? I don't think so. I don't think it's that severe. The fact is that we should have had an override 3-4 years ago. We used stabilization to do this ambulance project. And why? Because these people, the finance committee, the planning board, the select board didn't want to increase your taxes. We used it from our coffers. And that's why they didn't do the override then. So the fact is that the people around here that sit on these boards, we're the ones that are also paying. We're not living in Northampton or Amherst or Springfield. We live in Hampton. So we're very cognizant of every single dollar that's spent towards services and towards these things that we want to do. Not everything we do is going to work out, but I think for the most part, most of the people here are more than sincere about trying to go and spend your money and our own money wisely to doing services that are value added to the town.
And just to clarify something that Sean said. We cannot single out the big box businesses and say your tax rate is gonna be $30 and everybody else is $11.63. Commercial is commercial, so that's the big boxes, the little businesses, as he was saying, and the farmers. So we are really cognizant of that when we decide tax rates. So that's one thing, and item number 2 is what we're trying to do by recommending this override is to keep this town in a way that we all are accustomed to it being. I have employees who live north of us, south of us. They come in to work in the winter, they say, these roads are the best roads that I've come across on my way to work, and everybody says that. So is that worth $2 million? No, but it's part of what the $2 million will buy us. We talk about having equipment that people think we shouldn't have bought. But to me, that's an insurance policy. Water line breaks in front of your house, town DPW employees are gonna get called, whatever time of day it is, within an hour, they're supposed to be there. They're going to fix that. If we had to farm that work out, it could be days, weeks, till a contractor can get there to help us out. So again, we've built this town into something that we're all proud of, and we want to continue to keep it that way.
I know there's this study when it comes to the salaries, they're getting, the employees are getting their 1.5 to 2.5 to 3% of raises. But the residents of this town, whether if you're working or self-employed, it's tough to be able to, are they assured to be getting their 2.5 to 3% raises? We can't guarantee that as homeowners, as someone that's self-employed, to be doing that. So it's very tough on the town to be asking of this 2.5%, where we're not getting our 2.5 to 3% raises ourselves. No, sure, we were saying, a little upset about that with Route 9, but it's our personal taxes. Sorry to say, it all goes to the end user. Your taxes might go up, but for you to be making your money, there's increases in taxes, there's increases in rent fees and cleaning fees and hotel fees. So, you could say that you're doing great for the town, which you are, but also, I'm sure you're also making your money back from to the end user. Randy was talking about, yes, it's great for the Route 9, but what good is it? That to me is saying that there's lack of discipline, where if the roads during the winter time are great, but other towns aren't, maybe they're being more disciplined as to the spending of the salt and the plowing that they're doing, that maybe we need to be doing more, a little bit of discipline on the roads that we're putting down more salt. Or, instead of plowing every half an hour, maybe an hour, so there's more accumulation, so less hours, more time, and less salt is being used. So, yes, it is great to have Route 9, but when you travel outside of Route 9, going to South Hadley, North Hadley, or going to Sunland, and their roads are bad, maybe they're just being more disciplined in the money spent on the roads.
I think that to that point, then when the ambulance tries to go through the snow and gets stuck, then you can go and say, you saved some money at least, but by not plowing that day. So I guess that's a win. But the fact is that, all of these things are not gonna amount to $2 million. We're talking about things that are nominal in terms of savings. I'm not saying there's definitely some policy changes that we need to enact, but it's not gonna go and account for two millions of dollars of savings. The only way we're gonna save millions of dollars of savings is we're gonna lay off probably 20 to 30 people in this town. That's about the only way. It's not like we can return a truck, or we can return some service that we're obligated to pay for, like insurance. We can't, those are not refundable. Those are things that we're obligated to do. So those are not things. If you want to go to a part-time fire department and after 7 p.m. you have a house fire, or you have a business that catches fire, and you want to go and wait for Northampton or South Hadley or Amherst to show up. That's basically what we're looking for.
There was a call fireman in town for many, many years. We did a pretty good job of responding to fires no matter what was out here. And we fixed our own equipment. We survived, and we had a pretty damn good fire department with call firemen. The trucks going down the street, the Bruegel bagels, where you need to send that engine to get coffee or donuts or something. It's like, really? They're not joyriding vehicles. Those are emergency vehicles that should be used for that thing. It's like, the fire department's getting a little bit out of hand. That's only my opinion, but I've been there and I've done it, and I know what it's like.
Yeah, anybody else have any questions?
I think we have the fire chief to speak on that.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, we have two full-time firefighters on 24/7, that's what the staffing is. As far as driving around in a fire truck. If they're out in a fire truck, they're usually doing something. And if they have to respond to a call, if they're picking up a copy. For them to go out in a utility truck. And then have to respond back to the station. And then go back out to a call, it's taking that time frame. And we still have a wonderful call force. Unfortunately, the numbers have decreased because people just don't have the time to do it. So again, I appreciate the service from everybody and the education I received from our past call force firefighters, but. We're one of the departments that is very self-sufficient. We have our own onboard mechanic who does all the work inside, so we're not paying $155 an hour to send it out to get something repaired on it. We're doing it in-house. So, again, we're doing our best and we'd be happy to sit down and go through our budget and go through everything that our operation is doing. Because we are truly trying to just make the town of Hadley safer. Our second ambulance that we have, it's going out on a second call. And it's filling that gap where, you know, we're not seeing where our communities around us can even help us and support us because staffing levels are so short. So that's the other issue is the time frame. It's not there anymore. We need to have our own, we need to be able to cover our own.
If I can add to the good news list, certainly the overrides gotten a lot of people's attention. And sorry that was what, it takes sometimes to get attention, but the good news is people are communicating very freely. I'll speak for myself. I think I've heard from more people in town in the past several weeks than I have in a long time. And that's a good thing, because now we're also hearing more about what's on people's minds and what their thought process might be about something, and it definitely means we, going forward, need to do a better job and continue to try to promote that outreach, and that's something else that we're also committed to, so I just want to thank everybody who's come to the forums and spoken up, even in private, it's extremely helpful.
I'd like to just say one more thing, is that, somebody asked about how's this gonna improve other years? When we stop using free cash and stabilization, that will help us cushion those unexpected expenses and increases that 2.5 doesn't cover. That's the whole point. If we hadn't used that money previously, oh my God, we probably have plenty. You could add up those numbers on the free cash, probably. You probably could, and we probably have $5 million in free cash.
Well, you don't have.
But we would have accumulated, just in the years I've been involved, in the 5 years, it's been anywhere from 400 to approximately $500,000 a year at free cash. Now it's 800. Add that up, that's an awful lot of money to be sitting in our coffers right now. We could have probably just bought the fire truck instead of borrowing against it.
Okay, anybody else have any questions?
Last question.
Right.
So so 2.5, that's our typical increase every year. What is the proposed, what, with this override, what is the actual proposed percentage is going to be?
I think it works out.
The 5, 10,
15%.
15%?
I think 16. What was it? 167?
16%?
Yeah.
Well, all right, thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else have any questions, comments? Okay, I think we beat it to death enough for tonight. Thank you all for coming, and please, go to town meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn the finance committee.
So